All right, let's dive into this research on seminal fluid. Seems we're going way beyond just sperm today.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The big discovery is that seminal fluid isn't just about delivering sperm.
So more than a delivery system.
Right. It's this complex mix of, well, bioreactive molecules.
Mm-hmm.
And these molecules trigger changes in the female body.
Changes. Like what?
Well, one of the more surprising findings is that it triggers an inflammatory response in the female reproductive tract.
Hold on, inflammation. Isn't that a bad thing, usually?
You'd think so, but in this case, it's actually beneficial.
Okay.
Think of it like hitting a reset button.
Mm.
This response, the inflammation, it helps clear out microbes and excess sperm. It's like prepping the environment for pregnancy.
So like a cleaning crew comes in first,
Yeah,
before the main event.
exactly. And it's not just cleaning up. This inflammatory response also gets the immune system ready
Ready for what?
to accept the embryo. It's really crucial for a successful pregnancy.
That makes sense. The embryo is, well, half foreign,
Right.
has genes from both parents.
Mhm.
So the mother's immune system has to be really careful not to reject it.
Exactly. And seminal fluid, it's like it plays a key role in this whole process. Well,
Okay.
by boosting the number of what we call regulatory T cells or TREGs.
Tregs.
Yeah, think of them as like the peacekeepers of the
Okay.
immune system. They help dampen down the response, to prevent it from attacking the developing fetus.
So seminal fluid is like what, a diplomat or something?
Yeah.
Smoothing things over between the embryo and the mom's immune system.
Yeah, kind of. But how does it work? Well, one of the key things is a molecule called TGF-β.
TGF-β.
It's a really powerful immune regulator, like the conductor of an orchestra.
And it's in the seminal fluid.
Yeah, it directs the immune response, towards tolerance rather than attacking.
That's wild. Anything else in this seminal fluid orchestra?
Oh, absolutely. There's this type of prostaglandin. It's called 19-OHPGE, and it's, well, abundant in human seminal fluid.
What does it do?
It seems to act as almost like a bodyguard for the sperm, protecting them from the female immune system.
Okay, so TGF-β is the conductor, and this 19-OHPGE is the bodyguard.
Right. And then there's TLR4.
What's that?
It's a receptor involved in immune responses. Components in seminal fluid can actually trigger this receptor.
Showing how complex the communication is.
Exactly.
But I have to ask, is there a downside to all this immune modulation? Could it have, negative effects?
It's a good question. And, well, the answer is yes.
Okay.
It's a delicate balance. See, while a lot of the components in seminal fluid are beneficial, some can actually hinder fertility.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, one example is interferon gamma.
And what's that?
It's a cytokine. It can actually suppress the production of beneficial factors like CSF2, which is important for embryo development. So too much of this interferon gamma could make it harder to get pregnant.
So some parts help fertility and others can hurt it.
Right. It's a balance.
What can influence that balance, like a man's lifestyle choices?
Oh, absolutely. That's a big area of research. And there's growing evidence that things like, diet, stress, even overall health, it can all have an impact, both on the quality and the actual composition of seminal fluid.
So it's not just on women to be healthy when it comes to, well, having a baby.
Exactly.
Wow. This is really fascinating. So we talked about the immune response, this delicate balance in seminal fluid.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier that it can directly impact the embryo itself.
How? Yeah, so seminal fluid can actually change the levels of different growth factors and cytokines in the uterus. It's like fine-tuning the environment for the embryo. And these early influences, they can have lasting effects on the offspring, their health and well-being.
So it's not just about conception then.
Right, it's about the whole process, setting the stage for a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby.
Incredible. It also makes you think about sperm differently. They aren't just along for the ride.
You got it. Sperm can also trigger changes in the female reproductive tract, like interacting with different cells, epithelial cells and immune cells.
So both seminal fluid and sperm are really active in this whole process.
Yeah. And it's not just in mammals.
Right, you mentioned invertebrates.
Yeah, seminal fluid plays a fascinating role in invertebrates, too. Like, it's been extensively studied in flies.
The flies, really?
Yeah, it can influence all sorts of things, from egg release to sperm storage, even female behavior.
Flies. What kind of influence are we talking about?
Well, for example, it can make the female fly less receptive to mating with other males. It's a way for the male to make sure he's the father.
Wow, so it's like mind control in flies.
Well, in a way, yes. It's really a fascinating example of how seminal fluid can have effects beyond just the reproductive tract.
Uh-huh.
And these effects, they're often caused by specific molecules. They've evolved for this very purpose.
So it's really specific molecules causing very specific effects.
Right.
This is incredible. It seems like we've only just begun to understand this whole world of seminal fluid. It's not just about sperm. It's about messages and signals, this whole interaction that really shapes the reproductive process.
Absolutely. The more we learn about all this, the better we'll be able to deal with things like infertility
Yeah,
and promote, healthy pregnancies and healthy babies.
that's amazing. What else is there to learn about in this field?
Well, there's still so much to explore. We've been talking about natural conception, but what about assisted reproduction techniques
Yeah.
like IVF?
IVF.
Yeah, it often bypasses natural seminal fluid exposure, which could be really important.
Oh, interesting. So what happens when you take seminal fluid out of the picture?
Well, think about it. Traditional IVF, it usually just involves introducing the sperm into the uterus. You miss out on all those crucial interactions.
So what are the implications then of skipping the natural seminal fluid exposure? Could that affect IVF success rates?
Well, there is some evidence that suggests it plays a role. Some studies, show that having intercourse around the time of the embryo transfer can actually improve pregnancy rates.
Really? So even with IVF, seminal fluid matters.
It seems that way. It shows how important it is to think about the whole biological context. Even when we're using technology, it's not just getting the sperm to the egg. It's about the environment for fertilization, implantation, the whole thing.
So are there ways to actually use seminal fluid in IVF to improve those success rates?
That's a good question, and researchers are working on it. Some are researching adding components of seminal fluid to the embryo transfer medium.
Oh.
It's still early, but the results look promising.
So maybe one day we could use seminal fluid to improve IVF. That's amazing.
It's an exciting area of research. It could help a lot of couples struggling with infertility. And beyond just IVF, understanding how seminal fluid affects the immune system could lead to new treatments for, pregnancy complications.
Like what? What kind of complications?
Well, we've talked about how important it is for the mother's immune system to accept the pregnancy. Conditions like preeclampsia, which is, a serious complication, it might actually be linked to an insufficient immune response to the paternal antigens.
Mm.
And there's evidence that women who haven't had much exposure to their partner's seminal fluid, before conceiving, they have a higher risk of developing preeclampsia.
So preeclampsia might be linked to, well, a lack of that immune priming we talked about.
That's one of the leading theories, yeah. And if that's true, then maybe we could, develop therapies based on seminal fluid to help prevent preeclampsia in these women.
Wow, that would be a huge change for maternal health.
Yeah.
It's incredible to think that, seminal fluid could help solve all these complex issues.
It really shows how complex the reproductive process is. We're always learning new things about how the male and female reproductive systems interact.
It's like they have a secret language,
Mm.
and we're only just starting to understand it.
Exactly. And this language, it's spoken across the animal kingdom. Remember, we talked about how seminal fluid plays a role in invertebrates, too.
Right. What are the differences and similarities between species?
Yeah.
In how seminal fluid works?
Well, the fundamental idea is the same. It's not just about delivering sperm. It's about, signaling and influencing the female reproductive system. But the details, the how and the why, they can be very different depending on the species.
Okay, so, how does it work in flies? You said it can make females less receptive to other males. How does that happen?
Well, in flies, seminal fluid has these proteins and peptides, and they can directly affect the female nervous system. They influence her behavior and even her physiology. One well-known example is the sexteptide. It triggers all kinds of changes in the female. She becomes less receptive to other males. She might even start producing more eggs, and there can even be changes in her eating habits.
It's really like mind control. Those romantic comedies where men manipulate women weren't too far off, I guess.
Well, kind of. It's a great example of how seminal fluid can have effects far beyond the reproductive tract. And these effects, they're often caused by specific molecules. They've evolved for this very purpose.
So specific molecules and specific pathways, that's how seminal fluid has such precise effects.
Right.
Are there any other interesting molecules we should know about?
Oh, tons. Seminal fluid is full of these bioactive molecules. One class that's getting a lot of attention lately is extracellular vesicles.
Extracellular vesicles, what are those?
Think of them as tiny packages, like bubbles that cells release.
Bubbles.
Yeah, and they carry all sorts of stuff, proteins, lipids, even genetic material. They're like little messengers between cells. And seminal fluid, it's got lots of these vesicles, especially ones called prostosomes. They come from the prostate gland.
So these prostosomes are like little messages from the male reproductive system.
Yeah, go into the female body.
What kind of messages are they carrying?
That's what scientists are trying to figure out. We know they can interact with sperm, affecting how well they move and their ability to fertilize the egg, but they can also interact with cells in the female reproductive tract, maybe even influencing things like immune responses, embryo implantation, and even placental development.
Wow, so these tiny vesicles have a big role to play. What are scientists focusing on with this prostosome research?
Well, one of the most exciting things is looking at how the contents of these vesicles can change depending on the male's health and environment.
Really?
Yeah, it's like the male body is sending information about himself along with the sperm, giving the female body a look at his overall fitness.
It's like a biochemical way of communicating to see if the male's a good mate and to see how healthy his offspring might be. Amazing. It sounds like we've uncovered a whole new level of communication in reproduction.
Right. Seminal fluid isn't just about the sperm, it's about these messages, the signals. It's all these complex interactions that shape how reproduction happens.
Exactly. And the more we learn, the better we can handle reproductive problems and, promote healthy pregnancies and healthy babies. It's amazing,
Yeah.
all this secret communication going on. It makes you wonder if we've been missing something important when it comes to, reproductive health.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. We always focus on the sperm count, motility, that kind of thing, but maybe it's the composition of the seminal fluid that matters more, all those messages it carries.
Right. And especially when you think about the impact on, the kids. You were saying earlier that it can influence how the embryo develops and even affect the health of future generations. That's huge.
It is. It raises so many questions, like ethical questions, philosophical questions. What if a father's lifestyle choices can actually change his seminal fluid? And then that affects the health of his children, even his grandchildren. What does that mean for, how we think about responsibility? Inheritance.
Yeah, it's like we're changing how we think about nature versus nurture. It's not just about your genes, it's the environment those genes are in, even before conception. So dads out there, listen up. Your choices matter, not just for you, but for generations to come.
Right. And knowing this, it should help us make healthier choices. We're not just affecting ourselves, but our kids and their kids.
It's a powerful idea, one that we need to be paying more attention to. So where do we go from here? What are the big takeaways from all this, from our deep dive into seminal fluid?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Seminal fluid, it's not just a delivery system for sperm. It's this complex fluid. It plays a crucial role in the whole process that leads to a successful pregnancy. It affects immune responses, ovulation, how the embryo develops, and even the health of the offspring.
And that knowledge is important for everything, from understanding infertility to preventing those complications during pregnancy, maybe even, shaping the health of future generations.
Exactly. We can't just focus on the sperm. We have to understand the complexity of seminal fluid, how it interacts with the female body.
It's like a whole new world of reproductive biology is opening up, and seminal fluid is, it's leading the way.
It is. And the more we learn, the more surprises we're going to find. I'm sure of it.
I'm definitely excited to see what the future holds for this research. We're only scratching the surface. This is a fascinating fluid.
Oh, yeah. Who knows what secrets are still hidden in there?
So, to everyone listening, stay tuned, keep learning. And don't forget, when it comes to reproduction, there's a lot more going on than we think.
Always more to learn.
It really is mind-blowing. All these discoveries, they could really change how we think about fertility treatments and how we care for pregnant women in the future.
I think so, yeah. The more we learn about these molecules in seminal fluid, the better we can target, specific problems.
So we could create therapies for specific issues.
Right. Like, let's say we find a molecule that's really important for embryo implantation. Well, then maybe we can use that to help IVF work better.
So it's not just about getting the egg and sperm together. It's about, making sure the whole environment is right for a successful pregnancy.
Exactly. We need to look at the whole picture, everything that's happening at each stage.
And this knowledge helps people, take charge of their own reproductive health, too.
Right. If men know that their lifestyle choices can change the composition of their seminal fluid, they can make choices that, help them have healthier sperm and healthier seminal fluid.
Right. Things like diet, exercise, managing stress, not smoking, not drinking too much, they all help. A healthier reproductive system overall.
So it's about preventing problems, not just treating them after they happen.
Exactly. That's why research is so important. The more we understand, the more we can help couples have families and and help them have healthy pregnancies and babies. So, to everyone listening, I hope this deep dive has shown you how amazing seminal fluid really is. It's not just about carrying sperm. It's a key player in reproduction. And it affects everything from fertility to health of the pregnancy, even to the health of future generations.
And this is only the beginning. The more research we do, the more fascinating secrets we'll discover about seminal fluid.
So keep learning, be curious, and never underestimate the power of seminal fluid. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.